Hello and welcome to this presentation for Pastor Builders. One of the calling that is upon the church since its very first day is the calling to raise up leaders for ministry. It started with Jesus calling his apostles, and he invited them to become fishers of men. And after Jesus' death and resurrection and ascension, they carried on the ministry that Jesus had passed on to them. We see the same dynamic in the early church. Paul, as he travels around, is always recruiting and mentoring the next generation for ministry. In 2 Timothy 2:2, he gives these explicit instructions to Timothy. What you have heard me say in the presence of many faithful witnesses, entrust to faithful men who will be able to teach others. And in just that one verse, we see 4 layers of ministry development. There's Paul, there's Timothy, then there's faithful men who are then going to teach others. Now, this calling to raise up leaders for ministry is still in effect for us today. And I would like to share in the next few moments of how our church might be faithfully able to answer that call. Let me begin with the goal for Pastor Builders. Our goal is to establish a residency program to prepare emerging leaders for ordained pastoral ministry. And hopefully just from that goal right there, you can see why this program is called Pastor Builders. Now, why now? Why are we interested in getting involved in something like this and launching something? Well, there is an urgent need. The need to train and develop pastors is urgent. The average age of pastors in America is somewhere right around 55, and this has been steadily increasing over the last several decades. And it is expected that somewhere between 25 to 40% of active pastors are going to retire within the next decade, which means the church, the American church, needs a rapid influx of pastoral leaders, or we are going to be facing a major leadership crisis. And that crisis would result in many empty pulpits and many churches that would not have a pastor to shepherd and lead and guide them. When we look at that possibility, it would be ineffective ministry and the potential for many, many church closings. Now, the good news in this is that the Lord is at work in younger generations. And there is a wonderful movement in the Gen Z to know the Lord and a calling to pursue a life in ministry. And so even as we see this one generation aging out, God is calling and preparing the next generation to step in. And so the question is, how can we help them do that? But before I answer that question, I want us to first consider some of the seismic shifts that are going on in pastoral ministry formation. Now, the first is that the traditional pipeline is drying up rapidly. And by that I mean going to a 4-year Bible college, 3 years of seminary. Now, reasons why that pipeline is drying up, because the time and the cost is really prohibitive for many prospective students. Now, just to give you an example of what this is like in real time, when I entered seminary in the fall of 1995, the enrollment of full-time students at Princeton was 736. In 2025, that number had decreased to 276. So 736 all the way down to 276. We've heard that the enrollment of people in the biblical ministry program at Kuiper College in the last decade is down somewhere around 90%. And just recently, the enrollment of full-time students at Western Seminary in Holland was 64. compared to 360 part-time students. Again, this idea of going to school full-time and getting your Master's of Divinity and then just heading out into the church that's just falling apart. That model isn't working anymore. Now, at the same time, there is a framework for pastoral ordination that is emerging. Again, the traditional pathway would be gaining an academic degree, a Master's of Divinity, at a seminary and then moving to a church. But in recent years, ordination has moved to a much more holistic approach where it's based as much on competency as it is academic work. And so with this change, the local church has quickly replaced academic institutions of higher education as the primary source for ministry training. I'll say that again. The church is replacing the seminary, the higher ed institutions as the primary grounds for ministry training. Now, again, this new approach, it takes into account academic knowledge, but other things like character formation and ministry experience as critical components for pastoral formation. Well, why First Reformed Church? What would make us a viable church to get into training future pastors? Well, there's 3 reasons. First is the size of our church. We would offer a unique environment to train men and women in a small to mid-sized church context. And I do mean it would be unique because virtually every residency ministry type training program that is going on right now is taking place in very large churches with 1,000 or more people in them. And yet 65 to 70% of all churches in the U.S. worship with less than 100 people. So people are going to be getting experiences in really, really, really large churches of 2,000 and then serving at a church that has 75 or 95 or 110 people in it. And so we could give a much more realistic experience in leading a church. Also, pastoral residents at large churches tend to work in very specialized areas rather than receiving a more broad base of training. So it's you've got a very narrow lane in which you are working. So consequently, a lot of people who are in residency programs, they're not necessarily getting a lot of relevant training and opportunities that are going to translate into future success. And we can offer that here at First Reformed. A second reason is that we are a healthy and stable church. God has done really wonderful things here, and we have a strong and vital congregation, and we have an opportunity to show future generations of what right looks like, that we have a gospel-centered ministry, that we work in with great theology and people of substance and character and loving relationships and all those kind of things. And so what we have here at First Reformed Church is worth multiplying and worth replicating. We have a model that's worth learning from. And then third is we have an experienced pastorate, primarily me. I have a strong academic background, and I have about 30 years of experience leading churches. And I certainly, in this, feel a calling to share what I know, what God has poured into me, what others have poured into me, and share it with next generation pastors. So First Reformed Church, it makes a lot of sense for us to be getting involved with training future pastors. Let me tell you a little bit about the program and how it will be designed. What is this model going to be for building future pastors? We would like to run a 2-year program that would allow emerging leaders the opportunity to discern a call to vocational ministry and to equip them for a life of fruitful and meaningful ministry. And the goal would be to build ministry candidates towards ordination within the Alliance of Reformed Churches. And one of the very first things that a resident would do when they would join this program they would go through a comprehensive assessment with the Alliance to see what they need to get from here to there, so that within a 2-year period they would be able to be ordained and take a call in a church. The 3 main areas of focus of the program would be the same that we have for our own discipleship making framework in our church. First is the knowing. So there's definitely going to be an academic piece. Now, we're so fortunate that we have partners like the Foundry or Coram Deo that do this very thing. They come alongside people in programs like this and help meet the academic gaps that people may be missing. It's also possible that based on my areas of expertise and knowledge and experience, that I would also possibly be able to help with some of the academic portion and getting residents up to speed for ordination. Another part would be the being, the interior, the character. And this is where there'd be a lot of coaching and mentoring on my part. And I am a firm believer in a character-based ministry. And so the focus would be developing the internal person on spiritual disciplines, on just being the person that God has called his shepherds to be. And to be able to sustain that over a longer period of time and do some real interior work on the heart and the soul and those kind of things. The third aspect would be the doing. So we've got the knowing, the being, and the doing. And the doing is the practical side of it. And so residents here would be doing preaching, learning how to do that. They'd be giving opportunities to teach, whether it's in classes or lead small groups. They would get a primer on how to do administration at a church, working with me and our staff. Counseling, joining me with marital counseling or whatever else counseling needs our church might have. Working with Scott on worship planning. Presiding alongside me in weddings and funerals. Again, the idea is to provide people with an ability to work across a wide range of pastoral disciplines, to give them some exposure and experience to build towards that competency. And we would expect our residents to be here somewhere, from what we've seen in other places, between 15 to 24 hours a week, probably more in like that 18 to 20 hour range. And in that time, they would be working on those 3 different aspects. Well, let me talk a little bit about where we project this to be. And I want to walk us out to the end of 3 years. Now, the hope is that we're going to have someone joining our residency program, Pastor Builders, every year. And so that once we get going, we're going to have 2 residents here at a time. So in year 1, we'll have our first resident, and they'll be working in year 1. When we get to year 2, that first resident is going to be in their second year and working towards ordination, and we're going to be bringing on a second resident. By the time we get to the end of year 3, that first person we have brought on, they will have received their ordination and they will have already been serving in a church for a year. That second resident we brought on, they are going to be finishing up their ordination and they're going to be ready to move out. The third resident will be finishing their first year, moving into the second, and hopefully we'd already be looking at bringing on a fourth resident. And so the idea is every year, First Reformed Church will be sending out a pastor into a church. Now, what I'm so excited about, and I think the most thrilling part of this, is thinking about the exponential impact pastor builders can have on the future of the church. Because if we can train and develop someone for a 30-year career in ministry, thinking about the number of sermons, the number of baptisms, the number of weddings, the number of meetings, and the amount of disciples that they would be able to make, and the churches that they would be able to shepherd, and again, the impact that they would have on thousands of people, and then the impact that those thousands of people would have after them. Again, we might think of like Paul's that 4-layer bit, and we're going to be at the top of the pyramid, and we're going to see exponential, explosive impact. And the reality is we probably aren't going to see a whole lot of it, but we can know and trust that as we are doing this, God will bless and multiply what we do for future generations across the state, across the nation, and even across the globe. And you're going to have an opportunity to invest in this opportunity. And I'm going to invite Scott Beacons to come and join me. And we are going to hear a little bit about what it's going to take for First Reformed Church to invest in this kind of residency program.
Thank you, Pastor John. I think you can tell how excited Pastor John is about this and how much work and planning has gone into this. How long have you been working on this?
Over 2 years.
Over 2 years. Mm-hmm. And it's finally coming to a really exciting culmination here where each and every one of you can now be part of this, and to be part of this incredible journey of building pastors that will affect God's kingdom in such ways we'll never know. It'll be so great. And, I want you to think about pastor builders kind of like building a new church. And when you look at funding a new church, you look at some beautiful pictures, and you know that you're a part of something special when it gets completed. And you can look around and go, wow, I helped make this. And I want you to think about the impact and how that's going to make you feel when you can look around at these pastors that we've built and that get sent out to other churches and can hear stories about the impact they're making in people's lives and say, oh, we helped build that.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just having a conversation with someone, and the conversation went to church planting as a means of multiplication. And I had said, well, we're not really looking at church planting, we're looking at pastor planting. And for the same thing of like, boy, what we could... The exponential possibilities are just thrilling.
So when Pastor John and I were talking about funding this, one of the things that we really wanted to do was get commitments for 3 years, because we feel like if we can fund the program for 3 years, we'll have seen such great progress through this that people will be very excited to continue funding this beyond that 3-year program. And so Pastor John's put together an estimate of what it's going to cost to do this residency program, and it's about $18,000 per resident per year. So in those first 3 years, we estimate it's going to cost the church about $90,000 to fund this program. Mm-hmm. Now, Pastor John has already done some work in planning to get a couple of grants secured for this. One of them, a $10,000 grant from ARC, and another one, a matching grant. So with these two grants seeding it already, the $90,000 that we need to fund this program for 3 years really gets diminished down to $40,000 for the congregation to come up with, because that $40,000 will be matched dollar for dollar, which will bring us to $80,000, and then the $10,000 from the ARC. So this is really exciting because it's going to be a very low entry cost for this congregation, much lower than you'd think of for putting on an addition or building a new building, and you can spread it out over 3 years. So we've put together these little commitment cards for pastor builders that will allow you to make a commitment and a donation, whether you want to do it as a one-time gift or whether you want to do it over 3 years, over certain frequencies. But as we get these commitments in, then we're able to get the matching grant money to help fund this program. And we're so confident that if we can get this program funded, that it's going to be a perpetual thing, because it's going to just reap a harvest like we will have never seen before in what we're doing in this little church.
Yeah, and just as a clarifying a reminder that the 3-year commitment is we're getting 5 years worth of resident work. So it's multiplying right off from the very beginning. So it's very exciting.
And keep in mind that you can check with your tax advisor too. If you have appreciated stocks or securities, you can often donate those and even have a more effective way of contributing to something like this. So check with your tax advisor on that. Pastor John, I was going to ask you, what got you started down this path?
For a long time, I've wanted to teach at a college or seminary level, and that was actually one of the reasons I pursued a doctorate. But as I mentioned earlier, that stream has dried up rapidly. And so I've seen the Lord kind of turn this on its head and said, you don't need to go out there to train the next generation of pastors, do it here. But going back even further, after I had been through 2 years of seminary, I knew that I was not equipped to go out and to lead a church. I was a year away, and I knew I had zero practical experience, and I was going to flounder. And I went through basically a residency program for 12 months, and I was given so many opportunities to do all the things that we're talking about. And I grew so much in that. It was like fast forwarding through years of mistakes and all those things. And I had just a fantastic senior pastor just mentoring me and guiding me and encouraging me. And I've always just so valued that, because so many people, when they enter ministry, they don't have that. And we can just really start building a strong church for the future by giving people a couple of years here with a loving congregation and an opportunity to experience those things. And I know I benefited greatly from the time I spent as an intern, and I had a few other smaller residencies, one big one. And I'd like to think that even First Reformed Church has benefited from the people and the churches that invested me when I was in seminary and when I was a young pastor trying to figure out how to do ministry.
I was reading some statistics on Barna Trends about 3 out of 5 graduates from seminary will leave the ministry in a very short period of time. And I can only imagine that part of that is because they come out of seminary fairly ill-prepared to be a leader of what most of them are going to be, which is a smaller church. And knowing that it's more than just the knowledge part, it's the practice part of understanding, hey, if the boiler breaks, you got to figure out what to do with it, or staff and all those things that they probably don't teach in seminary.
No, in seminary we learn a lot of theology and Greek and Hebrew and great things, but not really the preparing you. And that's why an opportunity here with the residency program is really going to help build competency in next generation pastors, so that they don't flame out or get discouraged or burn out or whatever it is, but they'll have a really good foundation and base on which to spring forth from.
One of the things that I think is so clear to me is just how well prepared FRC is for this program. And when you talked with me earlier and spoke on this video earlier about a lot of the big churches do this, but the residents end up being either very specialized or they're doing entry-level menial work, which isn't really preparing them to go out and lead a church. Whereas here, they're going to get really shoulder-to-shoulder mentorship with somebody who's doing exactly what they're likely going to go off and do. Yeah,
and not a knock on big churches, because if you're you want to get into ministry and you get a residency at a church that has 2,500 people in it, you're not going to get a lot of chances to preach or teach, right? But just because of the system and the size of the staff and all that, so kind of by nature, it's going to be very limited in what you're going to be able to do. And we want to, again, we're in such a great place to be able to give people room to grow and to, try different things and to just expose them. So yeah, we are perfectly situated for building the next generation of pastors.
You know, you are the longest serving pastor in the history of FRC.
Mm-hmm.
And I've said at our anniversary recently that for me, if I were to describe where we're at as a church, the word I would use is stability.
Mm-hmm.
And that comes from your long tenure and commitment here. And I think that's also what sets us up well for this program right now. And you've been through a lot of different things in your career here. And I think it's pretty cool how the church, the congregation has really supported you as you've worked through different phases of your ministry. And that this right now, to me, is like our time as a congregation to really gather around you as you are being called into this next phase of your ministry. Because when I look back at when you got your when you went to your schooling and you went on all the different things that you went through, those were all different phases in your life, right? And the fact that you could do them here, I think, helped you and helped us because you stayed here.
Yeah, I've had such a wonderful partnership with the church. It's a reason I've been here so long that when I went through the doctoral program, some people from the church, they attended classes with me, and we had a coach visit us every month for 2 years, and it was about all of us. And when I did my sabbatical, so many people were helping be a part of that. And as I went away, the church was doing its own thing. So we've always kind of had this wonderful partnership. And that's how I see pastor builders working as well. Not only do I think I have things to share, but our staff and the whole church as well. This is an opportunity for all of us to invest in next generation pastors. And so I'm excited. And again, I think we've got just the best congregation to be able to offer that kind of opportunity.
So the need is clear, and we have the best situation to help fill that need right now. And so I'm urging the congregation to get behind this, and let's get behind Pastor John, and let's listen to this calling, and let's build something far greater than a bigger building or a nicer sanctuary. We're going to build people that are going to bring the kingdom of God here to so many people. So please, let's make some commitments, everyone, and let's get this off the ground. I appreciate it.
Well, I do appreciate your commitment to this, your interest. Thank you for watching. And I'm excited. And if you're wondering what's the timeline on this, assuming we start to see some commitments and pledges come in fairly soon, we'd like to begin searching for a resident later this spring. And my hope would be kind of after we all take our vacations sometime this summer, we will bring a resident on board. So the hope would be maybe in about 6 months or so, we would be meeting our very first resident.
That's going to be great.
All right.
Looking forward to it.
All right. Well, thank you so much for watching and being a part of this. And may God bless this whole process and those that he brings in our doors. May we be ever so faithful to build up in them that all that the Lord has already built up in us.